Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Autistic Lately. My name's Rachel. On this channel, we discuss all things neurodivergence. I am a late diagnosed autistic, as well as ADHD, OCD, and complex PTSD. When I first discovered I was autistic, late 2023, I went on this huge quest of devouring information about autism. It was a surprise to me, and I didn't know really much about it. Nothing really. So I went on a quest and quickly discovered in consuming information about autism that there were many traits in my childhood, as well as scenarios, things that happened from my childhood leading up to being a young adult, middle school, young adult, and into my adulthood and up to today and through today that are all related to autism. And it's interesting to see how these things have evolved over time in myself. And I just wanted to kind of hash that out today and hopefully present some information that is helpful to you all. This is how I learned when I went on my quest, learning from autistics on YouTube that discussed themselves and things that they had learned. So let's dive in. I'm going to be referring to my notes because I have a lot here and I want to be able to stay on track. And it's really easy for me to get going and talking and completely lose my focus of where I'm supposed to be. So, going all the way back to, my very, very early childhood, the things that I have discovered that turn out to be related to autism, which I didn't know, that I found out through testing and through researching. So, one thing I found out from my very early childhood was walking on tippy toes, that I did it and that is related to autism. I'm not sure why, but apparently different types of unusual gait are related. Also, I was reading very, very, very early. I found out that that is another trait related to autism. I was reading at about the age of 2, and I was reading at about a fifth grade level by kindergarten. So that caught the attention of teachers and things, and that's when they wanted to send me for special tests. Being introverted and afraid of people was a big thing for me. I was very quote unquote shy and basically terrified of people and I did horribly with any kind of change in routine. There was one time in kindergarten when I showed up at school and school was closed that day. I don't remember why. I just remember walking up and there was no one there. And I completely freaked out. Like I was bawling my head off. I didn't know what to do. I was completely very, very, very upset. I finally realized I needed to get home and walked home, but just that initial surprise and shock that things aren't the way they weren't the way they were supposed to be really, really, really threw me off. So when the attention of, my reading and everything else was brought up on the radar, they wanted to do special testing. So this lady came to my school. This is when I was in kindergarten, and I was terrified of this lady. I don't know why, I just was. I didn't know her. And she wanted me to do all these weird things that I had never done before, all these different tests. And it made me really upset. So it's written in the testing reports, that I was crying and I was scared and everything else. So that was another thing. I think those are, kind of all related to each other as far as being shy and not doing well with things outside of normal routine. It went so far as, falling asleep in the hallway if my mom missed my nap by a few minutes. One time she found me in a paper grocery bag when we had been shopping at the grocery store. She was losing her mind because she couldn't find me. And I was very, very small as a child. I was super short and tiny. And I was asleep in one of those brown paper grocery bags. So yeah, I needed my nap. So I always had massive sensory issues. As a child, I remember being really sensitive to certain things. I remember clothes being a problem, itchy or, just completely uncomfortable. These were things that were always a problem for me. I especially remember that when airplanes and jets would fly over my home, I would always reach up and plug my ears. There's one time that really stands out in my mind because I was playing in the mud out front, like making mud pies or something, and a jet went over, and I had mud all over my hands, and I plugged my ears, and it dried, and my mom had to dig all this dried mud out of my ears that night. It was Horrible, you guys. I don't recommend putting mud in your ears at all. So, something else was that I was completely naive. And I was the youngest child in my neighborhood, except for a boy down the street. But all the girls that were in my neighborhood, I was much younger than them. The one closest in age to me was a few years older than me. So most of the time they were fine. They tolerated me hanging around. Sometimes they'd even let me, come over and play. And one of them, the one that I was closest to age with, we became friends. But they used to play pranks on me. One time, one of them, this girl I actually really looked up to, got me to eat mud. She showed me that she had made me a cake or pie, I don't remember. And she had put, I don't know if you guys remember the Jolly Rancher sticks. It was like a red one, so I don't know if it was cinnamon or something like that. And she said, "Well, there's candy in it. It's okay." And it looked like mud to me, but she kept insisting it wasn't. And I finally tasted it because I couldn't understand why she would lie to me. I mean, she had never been malicious to me before. Um, so yeah, she got me to eat mud and just things like that. And I fell into some abuse by neighbor boys, which I would definitely attribute to things that have elicited trauma response. This happened when I was really, really, really young. I was exposed to things that no girl of age 5 should ever be exposed to. And the naivety that I had um, really set me up for these occurrences to happen. And it all comes back to autism and naivety related to such, being trusting and literal with people. So by the time middle school rolled around, I obviously no longer walked on my tippy toes, but I had developed some traits that the kids around me didn't necessarily appreciate. I would overshare big time, and I was very literal and honest to a fault. Kids don't appreciate that. I remember my friend coming to school in a new sweater, and she looked horrible in the color. She honestly did. It was not the right color for her. And she said, "How do you like my new sweater?" And I said, "It's not the right color for you." And she got mad at me. And I said, "Well, my mom spent all this money to take classes in color, and I know what I'm talking about." And that just made it worse. I mean, kids don't want to hear that. So it got to the point, I mean, middle school was a nightmare. Just the pranks and eventually the bullying that came about. And life just became so miserable for me. And I couldn't understand why people would always misunderstand me. There was a time when I was in the locker room after gym with other girls, and I don't remember what started the whole thing, but this girl that I thought had been my friend, but I distinctly remember her saying, "You think you're so great." And like horrified. I mean, I was to the point where I hated myself. I just wanted to die, basically. I was having the worst time of my life going to school and being around these kids all day where I didn't fit in. I didn't really have any true friends and I felt like an alien and it was horrible. And I was always trying to get people to like me. And the more I tried, the worse it got. It just was a really, really, really bad deal. So when she said that to me, I was completely mystified. I couldn't understand where she would possibly get that impression because it was so completely not true. I was really different. I was into books and music. I liked science fiction. I belonged to a Doctor Who fan club with my mom called the TARDIS Travelers, and we would go to different libraries around town every weekend and meet with this group, and we would watch episodes of Doctor Who and talk about them. And this was back in the 80s, and you know, kids my age didn't do that. They were into sports and all these silly things that I had no interest in at all. It was just not a good mix, not a good recipe for me to try and fit in with these kids. And but yet I was in that stage where I was learning to mask and camouflage to a degree. The camouflaging, I think, it was all really subconscious, unconscious, however you want to say. I would attempt to be like the other girls in an attempt to be liked and in an attempt to make friends. I was living in a house in what was increasingly becoming a bad neighborhood, and we were poor. and it was the teachers at this school were not helpful at all. Apparently, my third grade teacher got up in front of the class and told everyone that my family was really poor and we were really struggling and they all needed to be nice to me. Why would you tell a classroom of kids that? I mean, it was things like that just growing up that really did not help my situation. I had this thing where I would read the same books over and over and over. We didn't have I don't think we had a VCR yet. I had a tape recorder so I could listen to things. So I would record my favorite shows and movies when they came on TV. And we only had local TV, so there wasn't much. But I distinctly remember there was a WonderWorks episode of Bridge to Terabithia growing up. I actually have found that video and purchased it, but I had it recorded on audio tape. And one of my favorite things to do growing up in my bedroom at home, my safe place, was listen to Bridge to Terabithia while I did art or, actually read a story. I'd be listening to a story and reading a story at the same time. So the trauma of those middle school years was really bad. And that contributed to my decline as high school went on. I started smoking cigarettes. I started experimenting with drugs. I started drinking alcohol. I hung out with the heavy metal crowd, even though I didn't necessarily like heavy metal. I vibed with the guys out back with their cars and their cigarettes because they were away from the crowd, and I didn't fit in with that crowd either. I didn't necessarily belong with them. I didn't belong anywhere. It was a real conundrum for me. So drugs and alcohol were very appealing because it numbed my feelings about everything, and it was an escape. And I began to party, and these were things that I saw as fun, even though looking back, it wasn't fun. It wasn't any more fun than I was having anywhere else. So that led to some really bad times. When I was 19, I was, fully immersed in drugs and alcohol and began a relationship with a person that lasted 11 years that was basically the devil. It was a very, 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 very horrible time in my life. And my abuse of drugs and alcohol just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And there were plenty of times I should have died. Um, there were plenty of times where really bad things could have happened to me because of situations I put myself in. And it's an absolute miracle that I came out of those years alive, albeit riddled with complex trauma. Uh, but those are things we can work through. It was not good. And I see now that by getting into this relationship, I further exacerbated my own trauma by putting myself in certain situations that would just generate more trauma. Going to these, rock concerts with gazillions of people and very loud music that hurt my ears, and all these things were just sensory nightmares. But because I was, completely stoned, I managed to get through it and somehow maybe even thought I was having fun. It's really messed up. Throughout all those years, I was still camouflaging and I was miserable. It was absolutely horrible. After 11 years of that nonsense, I managed to escape. All of that is a whole nother story that I can get into with the PTSD videos at a later time. But that being said, moving forward, we're now into my 30s, and I was still camouflaging. I had learned to mask fairly well by this point. There were plenty of things about me that I always knew were different. So I basically spent my 30s finding a whole new way of life. I had escaped from my addictions, from the abuse, and kind of launched out on my own, so to speak. Met my husband, got married, found my faith. It was a really, really, really good time of just becoming a whole new person. But I still had these things that I carried along with me. It's really, really interesting to take all these things growing up from my past as a very, very young child, through middle school, through young adulthood, all the way up till now, and see how there's this common thread all the way from the beginning to now where it's me. I'm autistic, and certain things have faded out, other things have come in, but it's all the same. And it's interesting because now I have a name for all of it. And I'm really curious about you guys. Like, what did you have as a little kid that has, kind of gone by the wayside? Like the whole tippy toe thing. Did you guys ever do that? What did you guys do? What did you do as a kid? Or do you still have any of those traits? Do you have memories of doing things that just seem strange to others, but perfectly normal to you? What was middle school like for you guys? Was it as big of a nightmare for you as it was for me? Bet it was for a lot of us. I would think it would have to be. High school, forget about it. I hope that you guys didn't do what I did in your 20s, because the trauma that I put myself through is, I don't know if I'll be able to ever heal from all that. I'm just now beginning that journey. So, anyway, I'm really, really, really glad that I have found out that I'm autistic, because it allows me to make sense of all these different things that are seemingly unrelated in my life. I'm sure there's so many more. It is a really interesting learning journey. I am so excited to meet you guys and to talk with you about your autistic traits and how we can relate. And, I want to learn from you guys, and I hope that I have things you can learn from my stories. So, anyway, I suppose that's it for my lunch hour. I got to get back to work, but thanks for joining me today. I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel, drop a comment, even a like on my video would be great. So, Rachel from Autistic Lately, signing off. Bye.